So welcome to this month's webinar covering all of the updates from August and actually some from July as well. As I said, we missed last month's webinar, so we've got a bit of catch up to do. Now, before we get started, a very quick introduction. I believe most people in this webinar probably already are familiar. I think a lot of you have joined before, but my name is Jake. I run a Zoho consultancy called Limitless IT Consultancy. I've been working in the Zoho consultancy world for the past 7 years. I'm a certified CRM administrator. I've got a Zoho developer qualification, and we support clients from as small as 3 or 4 users all the way up to our biggest clients have 100 users plus. So really great because we get to see how Zoho works really well at those different levels of scale. And what works well in a 100 user plus company is totally different to what works well in a 4 user plus company. So it gives us a great perspective. And part of the reason I do these webinars is because I like to get into all of these new features, give them a good go, make sure I'm an expert on them before I start rolling them out for clients. And that's part of the reason I do these webinars, is really more for myself than anybody else in a selfish sort of way. So today we have a load of options. So we have updates across CRM, Zoho Books, Zoho Desk, Zoho Bookings, Zoho Forms, and Zoho Webinar. If you are in the webinar itself, I'm just going to put live a Q&A. Thanks, Leo. You can't see anything on LinkedIn. That is fine. I'm going to mess around with that separately. I'm just going to put a Q&A live in the webinar. Now, I want you guys to vote on what you want to see. You can vote for multiple things. So if you're interested in a couple of topics, you can do. Just to give everyone a couple of minutes to do and make their votes, I'll just run you through what this covers. So in CRM, we have a new static subform feature that allows us to pre-fill subforms. We also have some brand new scoring rules that are really powerful. Connected records, which is a new way to link data. And we have some new ways to filter our modules. Zoho Books is probably the other option I'm most interested in, which is the new sidebar, the project progress invoicing, and the asset register and depreciation calculation. Zoho Desk, we've got a couple of new reports in there. Zoho Bookings, we've got a redesign and a new appointments limits feature. Zoho Forms, we have a new limited pick list option, and we have a new verification code option. And in Zoho Writer, we have the advanced automation builder. I am fascinated by the results here. I would not have guessed our results, I'll give you that. So we've got currently at number 1, we have Zoho CRM. That's the one thing I did assume. At number 2, we have Zoho Forms. I would not have put Zoho Forms at number 2 if I was guessing where you guys would vote. So that is great. We will do Zoho Forms. We then have Zoho Bookings. We then have Zoho Desk. And we then have Zoho Books. Almost last, but poor Zoho Writer's down there with no votes. Poor Zoho Writer. But that is absolutely fine. In that case, we will kick off with Zoho CRM. And then we'll get into Zoho Forms after that. So let me swipe across on my screen. Can everyone see my screen, by the way? I just want to double check that. I presume you all can. Yeah, I've not heard a no, so that's probably good news. Yeah, I can see thumbs up. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's start at the beginning with the static subforms. So first of all, I'm going to show you what a static subform is, just so you've got an idea, and then I'll show you how we're going to actually build it and add it into our CRM. So I'm in our test system here, and I'm going to go into the CRM and into the deals module. And I'm going to create a brand new deal. Now, I'm going to ignore all these fields at the top. They're all pretty standard. But as I scroll down, you will see I have this documents requested feature. And what this is it's a subform. So it's a list of records, but you can see that one of the columns is already pre-filled with information. As soon as I create the deal, there's already information in here. Now, the idea here is that you can have a list of requirements, but actually already have options filled in. I've seen a couple of examples for this in Zoho's demo, and what I've done here is kind of like to collect documents. So I can go in, I can upload my documents for these different drop downs. But the other thing it can be used for is things like suggested add-on items or potentially upsell items and things like that when you're creating orders. Now, I'll show you how we do this. So to create a static subform, we're going to go into the setup cog in the bottom bottom left-hand corner even. It used to be in the top right-hand, and I'm not quite sure I'm used to it being moved yet. We're then going to search for modules, and we're going to open up any module where we want to add our static form. Let's say we're going to do it for accounts because maybe there's a list of documents we want to store against each account. So I'm going to go into accounts and I'm going to go in and edit the layout. I'm then on the sidebar here, and this is if you've not edited the modules in the CRM before, this is a little bit like if you're using like a drag and drop website builder or anything like that. Effectively what you're doing is you're dragging in what fields you want into this section here, and then that will display it on the actual module when you go to create a record. So in this case, when we're creating an account, there will now be a URL1 field. So pretty easy to go through and do this. For the static subform in particular, we're going to go into the sidebar here and we're going to find the subform option and we're going to drag it in. We'll put it near the top. And you're going to get two options. So you've got the standard option, which is what everybody's used to. And then you've got this new static option. Now, when I go in and create the static option, I can hit save and add static fields. When I do that, it's going to ask me straight away to add a list of what those static fields are going to be. So let's say in this case, we're interested in who the key contacts are at this account. So we might have a CEO, we might have a CFO, we might have a COO, we might have a, I don't know, a CMO. We're going to keep it simple and we're just going to do all the C's and we'll do a CTO. We'll go with those for the time being. Once we've got those in, we can color code them if we want, but there's no need to here, I don't think. Hit done. And that's going to add them onto a predefined list. What we then want to do in our instance is we want to then add a lookup field, because what we want to do is when someone's creating an account, we want them to link who is the CEO, who is the CFO, etc. So I'm going to add in an additional field. I'm going to go in and add a lookup field, and I'm going to call this contact. And again, I'm going to make this required, and I'm just going to make sure it's linking to the contacts module. I might also just add a comments box in here as well. So I'm going to add a multi-line and call it, oh, you can all see my music I've been playing, comments. And we will then make that, we'll keep that as optional and we'll hit save. So that's now all saved. So we now have that subform. In fact, let's just rename this to key contacts and hit save. We're then going to go back into the CRM. I'm just going to do it in a new tab just so we're not jumping around quite so much. We're going to go into accounts and we're going to hit create an account. When we do that, you'll now see we have a predefined list here already of our different roles. And I can click in there and it's going to give me a drop down of all of my contacts. Does that make sense so far? Is everyone following with that? Yeah? Perfect. Please do, by the way, if you've got questions or anything like that, please put them into the chat and the Q&A. Happy to answer questions as we're going through. Now, we're going to make this one better here because right now this is showing us all of the contacts in the system. Now, this random contact here doesn't work at this company, so they're not going to be the CEO for this company. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back into here and we're going to actually use another relatively new feature in Zoho. And we're going to go to edit our lookup and we're going to add a filter. And we're going to filter it based on the account name of the contact is, and then it should match the field account name, or in this case, it'll be parent ID, and we'll hit save. And then what we should get with a bit of luck, oh, it's having a bit of a problem. We are having a demo, so it does make sense that this is where we will have a little bit of a problem. Let's just make sure we've got that right. Just make sure we've got accounts. Let me switch that to account name there. See if that lets us save now. There we go. So my mistake. So we just wanted to select account name on both sides. And then when we go into here and refresh, in fact, let's go into an existing account. And let's open one of these up. Hopefully we've got a contact. So we can see we've got one contact against this account. I'm going to go into edit. And now when I go down to this drop down, what we should see is it's just going to give me, in fact, it's giving me a couple. So there might be a couple of duplicate account names in here. So a little bit of cleanup, but that's more test system related than feature related. Just looking at the questions here. So we've got a question from Caroline. Are those contacts, will they be assigned to the relevant account automatically? Good question. So they would need to be, and obviously this is just an example of a way that we could use the static form. When you create a contact, if it's a brand new contact, you would still select the account. So when I do that, I would then go through and then select it for as a key contact on the account. So I guess you're kind of selecting it twice. If we wanted to take this further, obviously this is just an example, we could add a little automation there that as soon as you added a contact here, it could update the account on that contact and match the account that you've selected. The only time where that sometimes gets complicated, and this is always a trouble to solve, is if you've got a contact that does genuinely work at two companies. And I do come across this with some clients where they might have a consultant or something like that that's working with multiple companies. Generally, the way I would approach that is I actually have them as two different contacts using their two different business emails. But that's not always necessarily the best way. It depends on the situation with the client. Does that answer your question, Caroline? And does anybody else have any questions on this feature before we move on? Yeah, perfect. Okay, so, and obviously the nice thing with this is it adds a lot of flexibility, and I like that the fields are pre-filled. One of the issues I sometimes find when you're setting up a CRM is if you leave too much for the end user to fill in without prompting them, at the best case, people just forget sometimes. So when you've already got those fields there, and when we've made it required, so they have to fill it in, it just means you have that data always being added. And in fact, this key contacts is something that I've been looking at doing in other places because actually I think it's quite useful sometimes to have those key contacts and have them raised up in the display. So it's one of those ways that we can use this static list. Okay, so switching back. So our next thing to look at now is our new scoring options. So is anybody on the webinar already familiar with lead scoring and scoring within the CRM, or is this going to be a sort of new concept to most people? If you give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down to give me an idea. Mostly thumbs up by the looks of it, so that is good news. Yeah, loads of thumbs up. Okay, brilliant. So I won't go all over the basics then, because you guys already know the concept of lead scoring and scoring within the CRM. What I did want to do though was show you some of the new options. So if we go back into our settings by going into that bottom cog again, and we can search for just scoring, and you'll get scoring rules. Now I've already got a scoring rule set up here for leads, but you can actually set up a scoring rule for any module. Lots of people think it has to be done on leads. You can't do it elsewhere, but you can set up scoring rules on deals, on accounts, on contacts. You've actually got a lot of flexibility there. Now, when you set up your scoring rules, you've got two options. You've got manual scoring and you've got ZIA or ZIA scoring, depending on who you ask. The manual scoring is the more traditional scoring where it's going to be based on fields, email activity, that kind of thing. The ZIA scoring or the ZIA scoring is more based on things like predictions based on previous leads and things like that. Right now, I'm still probably doing a lot more manual scoring, but one of the things Zoho have spoken about in their update and their release of these new features is actually they're working on combining manual and ZIA AI scoring so that you can use a combination of both. So certainly when that comes out, I'll be demoing that because I think that's going to be a big upgrade. For now, we'll do manual scoring and we'll do it on, let's say, contacts, and we'll do it on all layouts, and we'll hit next. So previously when you were doing your scoring, you could do your scoring based on individual fields. So one of my favorite ones to do it on is say city. So if city is in my case London, we're going to add 10 points. I might say that if the country isn't the United Kingdom, I'm going to decrease, I don't know, 50 points, whatever it might be for your particular business. We use scoring rules ourselves, and actually it's something I'm quite keen on with a lot of clients because particularly if you're doing a lot of prospecting or you have a really large leads database, sometimes it can be really difficult to know, well, which of those leads should you be targeting, and scoring is just a really good way to be able to filter through and work out who your quality leads are. So this is pretty standard. We've got our standard field scoring in here. What we now have though is this new add channels button, and there's a load of new channels in here. So we can now incorporate things like calls, campaigns, Zoho desk activity. So if you have somebody on a support contract, you can incorporate their Zoho desk activity, emails, Sales IQ, which relates to your live chats and your website, and Zoho surveys. And in fact, if I swipe across here and just jump ahead to this screen here, this will actually show you all of the new factors you can include in your scoring. There are a handful in there that I can't demo today purely because voice of the customer and some of the AI functionality is limited to Zoho One accounts with more than 15 users because this is a trial account, not all of it necessarily has it included. Just as I share that, I'm just going to read this question from Daniel here. Um, do you think they'll ever release scoring for other modules? Events, for example, scoring based on feedback fields would be super useful, but currently we have to do bespoke with workflows. Good question. And actually, that's a good correction because I probably spoke a little bit incorrectly a minute ago. So when you set up your scoring rules, you can do it for all of the built-in sort of contact modules, so the leads, contacts, account, and deals. But absolutely right, you can't do it for completely custom modules as of yet. To be honest, it wouldn't surprise me if they did that upgrade. It seems like it's relatively low-hanging fruit. I'm in the same boat as you, whereas if I've had to do this in the past, I've had to do custom workflows to do it. But yeah, certainly for the built-in modules, there's a lot more functionality coming. But for completely custom modules, it is going to still be a little bit more customized in how you implement that. So just to give a couple of examples here. So one of my favorite things to do is include the email activity. So for example, if somebody opens an email, I'm going to add some points onto there. If the email bounces, however, I want to decrease the points, and actually I'm going to decrease it by 1,000 because if the email bounces, it's probably not very good. You're actually limited to 100 there, getting a bit over the top there. And you can see we've got a couple of other options here as well. Where I think things get exciting though are some of these new ones with calls. So previously you couldn't include things like calls within your lead or contact scoring. Now though, we can start going in here and saying, actually, for every call that's made, so each call that's received, anytime we're going to add 10 points. So straight away we can start including those other factors into here. The other one that I really like is call duration, because particularly if you're doing outreach, we all know there's a huge difference between a call that's answered and lasts 10 seconds because it's somebody telling you to go away, and a call that lasts 15 minutes because it's somebody that's engaged and wants to know more. So here we can go in and say, okay, only show me calls greater than. The only slight bugbear is you do it in seconds. So you sometimes have to do a quick bit of maths that, okay, if we want to do 10 minutes, that's 600 seconds if I can do maths on a live webinar. And then you can add your points that way as well. Again, you've got Desk in here. So again, another great thing if you're using Zoho Desk support. Something that I've actually been experimenting with in my own system is primarily I use scoring for pre-sales. So when I'm talking about leads and prospects and when I'm talking about deals, because I want to evaluate how relevant they are, how likely they are to buy, how good a fit they are. But with this new scoring rule and being able to integrate Desk, one of the things I've been looking at doing is actually trying to get a score for contacts within companies in which we're already working with. You know, if we're getting a lot of desk tickets from somebody, that probably means they're running into a few issues, and maybe we need to set up a dedicated session for them to be able to help clarify those questions and just get Zoho working better for them. So actually using some of that desk and scoring integration in a slightly different way. You can actually have multiple scoring rules running at once as well, so it does give you some flexibility there. But again, you can see your options here. Lots of different ways of factoring this in. Sales IQ is the other one that I think is really interesting. Right now, it's limited to every chat missed. It's not, I wouldn't surprise me if very shortly we end up with some additional features to be able to also look at website activity. Sales IQ is already tracking that, and that would be a huge update if we could do that. But as you can see, there's a lot in here already, and you can see all the columns in here. If you have any specific questions on the scoring, please do send them over, and we'll see if we can answer them. At the end of this as well, I'll make sure we have time to do a bit of a Q&A as well to answer any questions. The final thing on lead scoring without any questions is the other thing you can do is obviously add fields. So whenever there is a score, you can add it to a field on the actual contact. I'd always recommend doing that because then you're able to filter and sort your contacts based on their score. You can also include things just like a negative score and the positive score. And that can sometimes be quite interesting as well if you're doing any kind of reporting and analysis, is to see actually where are they negative and where are they positive. But I'll sort of save that for a session more dedicated to scoring. When we're done, we can hit save, and we're going to continue and update old records, and that will then run and our new scoring will then be implemented. And obviously if you are using the scoring, if I go into one of my leads, you will see the score, depending on where you've set it up, you will see the score in a score field. So did we set up a score field previously? I think we did, but I might be wrong. We haven't set it up previously. So when you set up those scoring rules, as I say, you can map it to a field and then you would see it on the record. I thought we already had one in here, but we didn't in this test system. Okay, so moving on with our next thing is connected records. This is going to be a relatively quick one because I think it's still a feature that needs a little bit more fleshing out. So the way connected records work is if I go into a module, and it doesn't really matter which one, you will see this new section called connected records. And in fact, I bet a lot of you have already seen this popping up in your systems. I know clients have seen this popping up and have already asked me the question of, what is this? Connected records is a new system for Zoho to be able to link records between different modules together. Now, currently, you can only link to modules link to records in team modules. If you're unfamiliar with team modules, they're a part of the big UI and update to Zoho, and it allows you to create brand new custom modules. So we've got an example here of case studies that are only shared with specific teams. Now, the reason I'm showing this is Zoho has already promised that this is going to come and they're going to update this so you can link any module at all here. So I wanted to show you it now, kind of knowing that I think for most people, you're probably not going to use this until the next version, which Zoho has promised will be out by Christmas with that update. So the way it works is I'm in my deal here and I can go in and I can add a brand new record. And I'm going to go in and I'm going to link it to a case study record. I'm going to just name it test. I'm going to say, just fill in this. All of this is kind of irrelevant. It's just what's in our case studies module. And I'm going to hit save. What you'll then see is under our connected records, you've then got one connected record and it's our case study. If I want to though, I can add an additional one. So I might have test 2 and I can fill out this one as well. And I'm just going to speed through this because the actual case studies module is kind of irrelevant. And you can see we start to build up a list. Likewise, I can go in and I can add a, say, samples order. So maybe they want a sample of our product. I'll call this demo. And I can see that that's in there. And I can actually, if I want to, by the way, I can change the fields that are displayed here because obviously that number's not very helpful. And I can see that there's a demo. I can do the same thing here for the case study. So I might be the due date, customer name, contacted via, etc. Hit save and all of that's in there. Now, the main benefit of these connected records is they allow you to freely connect different records across the system together without an administrator having to go in to set up a dedicated field. So earlier on in this webinar, I showed you when I showed you the static subforms, I created a lookup field between the static subform on the accounts module and the contacts module, which allowed me to link those two modules together. But I had to do that as an administrator, and I had to know in advance that somebody was going to want to do that. The connected records, because you don't have to do that sort of pre-setup as an admin, it's far more flexible. So even if I never intended you to link a design request to a deal, because you've got this connected record functionality, it allows you to do it. So it means the system becomes a lot more flexible. If you've used something like Notion or Monday.com or any of those kind of newer style like connected databases, it's something that they've been doing for a little while now. What I love about this is the flexibility. I think it's going to open doors and actually give savvy Zoho users a great way to be able to get more from their data. My concern, if I'm honest with this, is that what I like right now as an administrator is that I have control over how things are linked together. Once this is launched and being used for everybody, we lose some element of control because a user could connect your deal to any record in the system. So I think that's the only thing I'm sort of conscious of as a sort of Zoho consultant is how do we make sure these connected records are being used well within a process? That said, I think overall it's a positive because being able to link these things together more freely and flexibly is great. When you do the link and click into a case study, you will see against that case study that it's linked to, and I can click back through to the deal. So it creates a nice relationship there. So I think it's going to add a lot of flexibility. I think where this is going to be great are for things like case studies, reviews, feedback, those kinds of data sets that could be linked anywhere in the system, but you want to centralize. I think that's going to be a great use for it. Just running through some questions we've got come through here. So can we link a deal to another deal? Currently, no, because deals aren't a team module. However, once the update has come so we can link any modules, that might be possible. It'd be interesting to see. Let's try it from case studies. Can I link a case study to a case study? So interestingly, no. So currently it looks like you can't link something in a module to the same module. Um, that said, if there was a requirement to link deals together, the way I would do that right now is you can add, as again, this is back to doing stuff as an admin. As an admin, you could go in and add a multi-select lookup, and that allows you to look up between two of the same modules. So basically, you can link deals together. And if it's a multi-select, there's no limit. So you can link an unlimited number of deals to each other. So that would be how I would solve that today. Further down the line, it might be that connected records allow you to do that in a little bit of a simpler way. Just going back to another question here from Mark. Does that only work on data entered after it is created, or will it calculate historically? So I think, Mark, you're getting back there to the lead scoring. It will calculate historically. So when you see me save on the lead scoring, it came up that pop-up of update or not update. As long as you click update, it will retrospectively recalculate the score. If you've got a huge lead database with a lot of history, that can take a little while. Obviously, if you've got a relatively small database, it's quite quick, but absolutely it can do it historically. Obviously, provided the data is in Zoho, it'll work quite nicely. Okay, so final update on the CRM. We're already half an hour in. I think I need to make these webinars longer, or I need to talk quicker. We'll have to find out. Next feature we want to talk about is the custom view modules. So historically, if you wanted to go into a record, say like accounts, and you wanted to go and create a filtered list of accounts, you could go up to the all accounts button and create a custom view. One of the problems here, though, is that you can only create that custom view based on information within that module. So if I want to say look at based on contacts, in fact, let's go, sorry, if I'm in contacts and I want to filter the view based on accounts, I can't do that here because I don't have the account fields. I have the name of the account, but I don't have any of the information that sits on the account level. Now, where that has changed is there is now the option to do cross-module filtering. Now, I'm just going to pull up another example CRM here because I've got it in a different one. This is one of those features that Zoho's kind of rolling out slowly over time, so it's popping up in some places but not everywhere. Let me just bring this over. So this is our live CRM, and you'll see this is a very different look. So I'm in the same place. In both of these, I'm in contacts. But now, instead of just having fields from within the contacts module to build my filter on, I can now go in and I can filter based on things in the contact module. But more importantly, I can filter based on related modules. So I can go in and I can say, okay, if it's with or without these contacts, and I can add those filters at a lower level module. And what's great is I can also add additional conditions in here. If I go in there and say with contacts, contacts with, let's say, deals, I can then also filter from the deal information. So it might be, okay, I want to show all contacts with deals where the amount is 5, for example. And what that will do is that will give me a list of all of the contacts that have a deal where the amount is 5. And if I want to take it a step further, I can say where the deal stage is inquiry, and I can say where the deal name is test. So this is, remember, we're in the contacts module now, but we're filtering based on our deals. So that's going to give me a list now. So when I hit save, let's call that demo. That's going to give me hopefully no contacts at all. There we go. So you can see there's no contacts because I've done a really niche filter. Now, where this is really powerful, though, is now I have got a list of these contacts with this specific filter. I can share this list with somebody, so I can share it either with a specific user or all users. But then what I could do is if I have the contacts here, I'm going to switch back into the test system where I can show you contacts. I can then select those contacts and I can then send mass emails. I can assign tasks, I can create tags, all of those kinds of actions that you want to do, but I'm able to filter it on this sub module level. Now, you can kind of do this in all CRMs today. So one of the updates Zoho released 3 or 4 months ago now is on this sidebar within the filters. If I just refresh, if I go down and do the same thing in here, I can do it within the filter. So I can do exactly the same thing here. So where amount, let's say amount is greater than 5, and I can add those multiple levels exactly like I did in my live CRM. The downside with this method though is although I can save this filter, I can't share this filter. So the filters are just for you, whereas the custom views can be shared with everybody. So although it's live in filters for everybody right now, it's the custom views I think is going to be really, really big. Is why I wanted to show you it in my live CRM, is because those you can share with other people, which means you can build these views and use them again and again and again and share them amongst your team. This is something we've been doing more of with clients, building views that give people exactly the information they need. So then when someone logs in, they see just that. So a relatively small update in some ways in functionality, but I think it's really, really big in the impact it's going to have. Okay, so that covers everything off in CRM. Any questions on CRM before we move on? Or it looks like, if I go into our results, it looks like Zoho Forms is still number 2, so we'll move on to Zoho Forms. Whilst I'm giving people an opportunity to answer questions, I'm going to have a quick tea break. Looks like we are all good, which is great. Okay, so let's get into Zoho Forms. I tell you, I would never have guessed in a million years that everyone was going to vote for Zoho Forms as number 2. I'm excited to talk about it. I just never thought anybody would go for it. Okay, so in case you are new to Zoho Forms kind of does what it says on the tin. It allows you to build dynamic web forms to collect data, which can then be connected to your CRM or another Zoho app or even third-party apps to funnel that data in. Now, as you may know, there are web forms built into the CRM. The web forms built into the CRM are pretty limited in functionality, and in fact, you have to have the fields on the web form kind of have to match the fields in the module itself. Zoho Forms is way more flexible. It allows you to do a lot more clever stuff. You can do dynamic rules where fields hide and show and all sorts of clever stuff like that. If you are building out your website now and you're looking at doing web forms, I would 100% recommend using Zoho Forms because it's going to give you far more flexibility than using the CRM forms. And it also means you haven't got to worry about any kind of third-party connectivity if you're using any kind of other plugin. So let's build a form together and we'll go through a couple of the new features. So I'm going to do this and I'm going to call this a webinar. Webinar sign up form. So I'm going to name my form. You've got a couple of options here. So you can do a standard form or you can do a card form. A card form is like you've probably seen like type filly forms where each field is a different screen and then you hit enter and it all slides across and it takes you to the next field. That's what those card forms are. I tend not to use them in all that often, to be honest, so I tend to stick to the standard forms. We'll hit create. Now, the first new thing you're going to notice here is you now have these grids, so you can now split your forms into multiple columns opposed to having just one long list of fields. This is pretty helpful actually in terms of laying things out because it was getting a bit messy when you have particularly long forms and everything stacked on top of each other. This is way easier to deal with. So let's go in and start building it. So the first thing we're going to want for our webinar sign up is name. So I'm going to drag in the name field. And I'm just going to click in there, and if I click on the field, I can make the first name and last name mandatory. We could add the title in there as well. Let's make that mandatory. And below I can update the title list. The built-in title list is very limited for some reason. It hasn't even got like the other, the standard options that you'd expect, but you can just go in there and add in your additional options quite easily, which is nice. You can also go down, and this is a pro tip here. I gave this to a client this week and they loved it because they were really fed up of it. You can specify the text casing, so whether things are all uppercase, whether they're proper case or whether they're lowercase. If you go into proper case, it will mean when someone types in their name, and if I hit access form, if I hold down the key, which I am now, it doesn't let them do their name in all caps. Obviously, the only slight downside are those people with a capital in the middle of their name. But we can't win for everybody, can we? Hopefully, there's nobody with a capital in the middle of the name in the chat. We'll soon find out, I'm sure. We'll put that back to normal for the time being and hit save. So we've got a name in there. What we then might want to do is collect their email address. Now, for a webinar, it might be that you don't want competitors getting access to your webinar. So you might want it to be that you want them to verify their email address to make sure they're not using a made-up email address. So this is one of the new features that we can do. So we're going to put email in here. I'm going to make it mandatory. We can include an email input confirmation. What that does is it adds an additional field below the email field where they have to retype their email. You don't necessarily need that. You can turn that on and off. You can then do the allowed domains, and this is where you can restrict or just allow certain domains. Anyone that signed up for this webinar will know we block any Gmail domains or Outlook domains, mainly because when people are signing up for the webinar, quite frankly, we want to know who you are. And if you're using generic email domains, it's very difficult to find out. Whereas if people are using a company domain, it is much easier to be able to find out who those people are. So when we go into here, we can go in and restrict specific domains. And I'm going to say we're not going to allow gmail.com or outlook.com. Oh, we don't need the space there. You can just add a comma separated list. It can be as long as you want. And then we're going to do our OTP verification. When we do that, it's going to ask us who we want to send the email from. I'm just going to let Zoho send it. We can change the subject and the message. We can also allow how many times and all sorts of other options here as well in terms of time frames. But I'm just going to hit done for the time being and hit save. And when I do that and I click access form, this time, if I fill this out, I'm going to do first name Jake, Harris, and then I'll put my work email in here. If I hit submit, it's not going to let me submit until I verify. So when I hit verify, it's going to send OTP, and that's going to then send me an email code to verify the form. And just as we wait for that to come through, I'm just going to read a question from Mark here. So we use the forms on iPad for our trade stand, but we can't get the form to automatically open once the previous person has hit submit. Good question. We can look at that in just a minute, Mark. I think I might have a solution for you on that one, so we'll see if I can help there. Good question, though. I've got a couple of clients that do very similar things. Okay, so just in the background here, I'm just going to copy the code from my Outlook and pop that in. We're going to verify OTP, and then we can then hit submit. You'll see it's then got that little tick box there, so we can see it's been verified, and we can then submit. So it's all built into that flow, which is quite nice. If we then go back to the builder, we might want to have some other options here as well. So we might want to add in our drop down, and this is where we're going to show off one of the other new options. So we might want to choose webinar date. So let's say we're running a couple of webinars, but we're going to limit how many people can join. We're going to list out the dates. So it might be the 1st of September. Then there might be the 1st of October and the 1st of November. Oh, turns out I cannot type when I'm doing this webinar. So I'm going to add my options in here. And then just below, you'll see this new choice availability. I can hit configure. What this allows me to do is put a limit for the number of times each option can be selected. And then once that limit has been reached, we can then choose whether to disable or hide the field. Now we can also choose whether to show the remaining amount as well. I really, really like this. I love the fact that it shows the remaining, particularly when you're getting down to low numbers, because it gives that sense of urgency that you want when people are signing up to things. So if we hit done and hit save, when I hit access form and hit the drop down, you can see here are our dates and here's what's remaining. And now it's only going to decrease the volume once someone's actually submitted the form. So if I go in and just submit this form again, it's going to ask me to verify. So let's just send that OTP. Let's bring up my other screen so I can do that. Perfect. So let me bring that across and put that in. Verify OTP. There we go. And hit submit. That is now all done. And if I go through again, what we should see is that has now decreased to 14. And of course, as I say, we can actually have it so it just disappears. That row disappears once that limit has been reached. But we've got one client in particular. In fact, they're probably in this. I'll be make sure I'm kind. I'm always kind to them. One of my favorite clients. But they do coaching, and one of the problems they have is they've got all these forms on their website, and sometimes over a weekend they might have somebody, 30 people sign up to a program that's only got 15 spaces. Now, previously, what they were doing was going onto their website, and once it was filled up, they were taking the form off. But of course, if this is happening over the weekend, people just keep signing up, and you don't want to let people down. So what we've done for them is we've implemented this. They opted not to show the remaining thing, which is absolutely fine. But now, once a slot is all filled up, it just disappears from the list, and then the next slot shows up on the list. So it just gives them that flexibility to not have to worry. Worked really, really well. It's one of those updates, and in fact, I found it when we were on a weekly call with this particular client because we were talking about how we're going to solve this problem. And as if by magic, as if Zoho was listening on our call, we found that this update was live, and I don't believe I've still seen an official announcement of it, but it's such a cool new feature. It's really, really useful. Now, in terms of wanting to be able to submit additional forms, so just to come back to your question, Mark, before we move on off of forms. So the way I would suspect, now I'm guessing you've probably already tried this a little bit, is when you go into the thank you and redirection, you can enter a redirect to. So what I would do, in fact, let's test this. Let's see if we can get this working. I'm just going to remove the email field purely so I don't have to keep doing the verification. And I'm going to go into share, and I'm going to get the URL for the form. I'm then going to go into settings and redirect. This is all new. This is live client or not client, unfortunately, Mark. If you want to be a client, let me know. But this is live problem solving, so we'll see what happens. So let's see. So I'm going to fill it in, and we'll see that when we submit it, does it come back? Submit. There we go. That is how you solve it, Mark. So there's your questions. We're doing live debugging as well as new Zoho updates in our webinars. So try and make them as useful as possible. But yeah, all I did there, just to clarify, just in case anybody wants to see, is within the Zoho form, I went into the share where I can get the URL for the form. Then I went into settings, and I went into the thank you and redirection page that allows you to choose what happens when the form is submitted. And I entered that same URL for the form into the redirection page, which basically means as soon as the form is saved, it just loops back to the form all automatically. Hopefully that gives you what you're after, Mark. If you can got a thumbs up or something like that, that'd be great. Yeah, perfect. Thumbs up. That is good news. Okay, perfect. So that covers off Zoho Forms. There are a load more features in Zoho Forms, actually. It's something that I might potentially do a separate webinar just dedicated to Zoho Forms because there's so many things you can do in Zoho Forms now. They've updated it loads over the last year with loads of new features, stuff like email and WhatsApp integration. You can do dynamic field pre-fills and things like that. There is loads of stuff, and in terms of integrations, you can see they just keep adding options into the list here. You can see there's loads, including Salesforce. So the Zoho Forms team, I don't know if they're like going a bit rogue or something, but they're collaborating with the enemy. But you can see there's loads of options in here, so it's definitely worth us potentially spending some more time on Zoho Forms. Anyway, let's go back to our poll and see what is number 3. We've got about 20 minutes to go, so we'll see where we're at, and then we'll see what we want to cover. Okay, Zoho Bookings, not to be confused with Zoho Books. The ing is doing a lot of heavy lifting in this name. So Zoho Bookings, if people don't know, is effectively Zoho's competitor to Calendly. And what it allows you to do is when somebody wants to book a meeting with you, instead of you going back and forth on email saying, oh, I'm free here, you free then, instead you can connect Zoho Bookings to your actual calendar, and then you can generate what Zoho calls consultations and send the link to that consultation out. The person on the other end will be able to see on your calendar when you're free. They won't see any private details, of course, and they can then book that meeting all through Zoho Bookings. Now, Zoho Bookings has just had a huge redesign. So if I switch to the old version, you will see it looks a little bit clunky, and it was a little bit clunky in all honesty, but you can see you get your tabs along the top, and you go into your booking pages and you have your settings. However, you now have the brand new version. Let's try out the new version, which not only has a sort of slightly slicker redesign, it also has a load of new functionality built in as well, which is great. One of those new bits of functionality that I really like is under consultations. We can go in and create a consultation. The first one is you can book recurring one-on-ones now. And you can also do recurring bookings. So if you want to give a link to someone to book a recurring meeting, you can now do that directly within Zoho Bookings. I've started doing this with some clients. Zoho Bookings up until now has been great for doing those one-off meetings. I use it for sales calls and things like that all the time. But once someone's a client and we're trying to schedule our regular meetings in there, we've always had to do that kind of either via email or through conversation. This now means you can do those pre-schedules on a recurring basis. So that's really, really useful. We'll stick to one time for the time being though, just for this demo. I'm going to go in and give this a name. In fact, let's call this client onboarding session. And let's say when we onboard a client, we are going to spend, say, 2 hours doing that onboarding session. If I choose online, I can connect to Microsoft Teams, so it can generate a Teams link. It can obviously also connect to Zoom or Zoho Meetings or any other service that you use. We'll hit next. We'll choose who the consultant's going to be. If you choose both consultants, what will happen is when someone books, it will look at both consultants' free time, and then based on when the client books, it will assign it to whichever consultant's free. In my case, we're just going to assign it to me, and we're going to create our consultation. Once we've done that, we can then go in and we can manage all of the other specific settings. Now, if I go in and get my link here, just to show you what this looks like, if I open this in a new tab, you can now see what this looks like. So again, much like Calendly, you can see, okay, on the 1st of September, Jake is free at 5:30 a.m. I'll be honest, I don't do meetings that early. I don't know where this has got its data from, but it is more keen than I am for a 5:30 a.m. meeting on a Monday morning. And that person can then go in, they can fill in their details, put in the email, put in a number, we'll just make a number up. Oh, it's going to ask for a valid number. Just put in a fake number, there we go. Schedule appointment, and that will then add that to my Outlook calendar. And actually the person booking it will get a calendar invite and they'll get a notification about the booking as well. But one of the problems I have, and I know a lot of people have this, is do you know what? I don't have the brain capacity to do 3 client onboardings in one day. They're really high focus, they're high energy. I want to make sure I'm prepared. So I don't want to be doing multiple of these a day. So what I can now do is under availability and limits, I can now go to appointment limit and I can set a maximum number of this type of appointment per day. So I can say, actually, I only want to do one of these per day. And what that means now is, despite how much free time I have on my calendar, only one of these will ever be able to show up on the calendar. So it just makes things far, far simpler. I can also do a limit on customer as well, so I can make sure the same customer isn't booking multiple times if I want to. I suspect that'll be useful, potentially maybe like sales onboarding calls and things like that, where you don't want someone constantly booking the same meeting to ask questions. But yeah, the slots per event is a huge update. It's one of those ones again that's hidden. I've not seen Zoho announce it, but it's such a powerful update in terms of how you can use this. And it's one of those sort of power user features that Calendly had that Zoho didn't. And actually, one of my clients in particular, actually the same client as the form client, they're getting a lot of love today. That client in particular, that was one of the things keeping them in Calendly. They couldn't use Zoho bookings because they had certain event types they could only do 1 or 2 a day, but there was no way of managing that within Zoho bookings. This has completely solved the problem. So again, another big update that's going to make it easier for more people to utilize Zoho, which is always a good thing in my view. Oh, I can see we've got loads of questions. It turns out I just needed to scroll. Um, amazing the things that you learn. Let's have a quick look whilst we're going through here whilst we're having a quick break. Let's go through these questions. So we've answered Mark's question. We've got another one here. What is the best field type option to allow for showing of images of products whilst then passing the selection into the CRM? Good forms-based questions. So we'll just switch back for a minute to answer these questions. So if we go back into, oh, that's the actual Zoho form. If we just go back into Zoho Forms, and I can see we've got another question further down from Leo as well. So what I would do is if you go to image choice, when you add the images, you can give it a label and you can give it a value. And in fact, if I change that value to text, I can give it a text value, and it's that text value that would be passed back via the integration. So it might be that the image is a picture of an office chair, or maybe 3 different office chairs. They select the middle one. The label might be blue, and the text behind the scenes might be, blue Herman Miller office chair. And it's that text that's sent back through the integration. So that'll probably give you what you're looking for there. Moving on through the questions here. So what else have we got? Can we use the WhatsApp integration in the UK? Yeah, I believe so. I've used it myself, so I don't see any reason why you wouldn't. The only caveat would be is you would need a WhatsApp business account, and that sometimes catches people out. A lot of people use WhatsApp personally as a business thing, but there is a real difference in terms of how it integrates between whether you've got a WhatsApp business or a WhatsApp personal. Just scrolling down, some questions from Leo. Can it link to multiple different calendars? So consultant 1 goes to calendar 1, consultant 2 goes to calendar 2. Yeah, absolutely. So within Zoho Bookings, it's one of my favorite apps, Zoho Bookings. I use it all the time. Within Zoho Bookings, each individual consultant can go in and connect their own calendars. And if I go in here, you can see my calendar's not actually syncing right now. But you can see I've got my calendar connected. So if someone books with me, it's going to show up on my calendar. But you can also have it check with conflicts against additional calendars as well. So for example, I've got mine also checking for conflicts against my personal and family calendar. If I've got the dentist like I had yesterday, I don't want someone booking a sales meeting with me, so that's on my personal calendar, but it blocks it out on my Zoho meetings as well. Likewise, if we've got family coming around or something like that, and we're doing something in the afternoon, we might block it out. So you've got that flexibility. I'd probably switch these around actually. I'll probably block out UK holidays because then people can't book bank holidays. Family time, I guess that gives me an excuse to avoid the mother-in-law. I actually get along really well with my mother-in-law, so don't tell her made the joke. But you can connect additional calendars as well. So I'm just doing Office 365 here, but you can connect your Zoho calendar, your Google calendar, and you can do multiple as well. So you can do them in parallel if you're working off of multiple calendars. So you've got a lot of flexibility in there. Likewise, with the video conferencing, you can connect Zoho Meetings, Google Meet, Microsoft Teams, and Zoom. And again, that's per user. So depending on who the meeting is with, it will do the connection based on who that meeting's with. If you do a group booking, so if it's including multiple people internally, it will cross-reference all of their calendars, and it will add the event to all of their calendars. The one feature they added about a year or so ago to bookings as well that I think is really important. It used to be that when someone booked a meeting, they'd get an email from Zoho Bookings saying, "Hey, you booked this meeting. Here's a link to add it to your calendar," and nobody would ever do it because who does? Um, what it now does is when you do that invite, it now actually sends a standard, in my case, Outlook invite to the person, so it shows up on their Outlook calendar. They can accept it all within the calendar, and I found that's massively increased or decreased the no-show rate because it's just on people's calendars. It works like a normal invite. There's loads of other options in here as well. One of the things I've not really used personally, but I know I've got a couple of clients using, is you can collect payment methods to Zoho Bookings. So if you wanted to say offer a paid consultation, maybe you want to offer a consultation for an hour, it costs 50 quid or whatever it might be, you can add the checkout as part of the process as well. So you can integrate Stripe so someone makes the booking and they pay all at the same time as part of the same process. Let's have a quick look. Does it now allow the person booking to add additional attendees to the booking? If you do, good question, does it now allow people to do that? What you would do is when you're creating the booking, you would do a group booking, and the group booking then would allow people to add additional people to it. Just running through the next one. Question from Caroline. How come my Zoho bookings is showing the old version? Good question. It might be that the update hasn't been released to whatever instance of Zoho you're on, so I don't know what your subscription is, Caroline. But the way to check, and sometimes the way to find it, is if you click on the profile picture that you'll have. In fact, let me switch to the old version. If you click on the little face in the top right hand corner, you can go in and then click here. You might see the try new button here. The other reason might be is if you're not an admin of the system, you might not have access to do that. Question from Mark. We use a form to request further info on the different bioethanol fires that we sell, but the form comes through. It doesn't specify the URL, so I don't know which product the info was on. Good question there, Mark. So that's another one on form. So the way I would manage that is when you embed the form, you can actually add, and this is a good tip for everybody. When you add a form to a website, you can actually add hidden fields. So one I often do is I'll add a URL field and I'll call it a conversion page, and I'll set that as a hidden field. And what that means is when someone loads up the form and when it's shown on your website, the field isn't shown. It's still there behind the scenes, it's just hidden. But what you can do when you're embedding it is have it so that that field is auto-filled with the page, the URL that form is on. Takes a little bit of help from a web developer because sometimes a little bit of JavaScript to do that. But that's a great way to do it because then you can pass through all that additional information. I do the same thing for UTM tracking as well. So if you're collecting information like what their click through was, what the original source was, what the landing page was, all that kind of stuff. Again, add hidden form fields to the form. Have a JavaScript script fill in that form when the page loads, and then when it's submitted, it just comes through as any other form field. So it just gives you that flexibility. I do that a lot with clients actually. It's a really great way of managing it. We do it for Google ads and things like that a lot as well, because obviously anyone that does paid advertising will know that you have like the GCLID, the unique Google ID. So you can pass that through as a hidden field. So then you have all of that information in Zoho. So it just gives you loads of flexibility then in terms of what you then do with that data in terms of reporting, syncing it with the CRM, all of that other stuff. Okay, we're coming up to the end of the hour here. Let's just see what our next vote was. Our next vote was Zoho Desk, so let's just fly through Zoho Desk super quickly because this is a relatively easy one. So Zoho Desk has had a couple of updates over the last couple of months, adding in some new reports. Now, Zoho Desk has always had built-in reports, but in my view, they've always been somewhat limited. Almost every client I work with Zoho Desk, we've then built Zoho Desk reports in Zoho Analytics. If you want to know more about that, I had a separate webinar about Zoho Analytics, so I will let you know about that. But on the desk front, it's been a little bit limiting if you're just using desk. But in the last month, they've added 3 brand new reports. So the agent availability report, which is tracking login time, log off time, and hours worked for the day for every one of your Zoho Desk agents. It also looks at the number of sessions as well. So if I go into Zoho Desk here and go into, oh, in fact, here it is. If I refresh, you can see I logged on at 1:27 p.m. So I had a very late morning today. And you can see my log off time isn't there yet. So my hours active has been 1.5 hours. And that's all now going to be tracked automatically. If I go back into here, we have also got the SLA requests report that has been added. Now, this is only relevant if you've got SLA set up, and an SLA, if this is sort of new context to you guys, an SLA is basically a time frame in which you're putting in that a ticket has to be resolved or replied to. These are quite standard if you're working with IT companies and things like that. You will have a service level agreement for how quickly things need to be acted upon. What this SLA report does is it gives you an overview of where things are at in terms of violation. So whether they're approaching violation, whether they have violated, or whether a violation has been resolved. I've got a screenshot here purely because we just don't have any desk tickets in our test system that have SLAs against them. So it was a little bit hard to demo. So I thought I'd include the report here. And the final one is similar. What this is doing is it's a resolution time report. This is looking at the time a ticket was created, the time it was resolved, and then the time frame in between to give you a resolution time for a ticket. Again, super useful built-in report. It's one of those ones I've built countless times in Zoho Analytics. So it's great to see that that's now being included directly within Zoho. Now, does anybody have any questions? If people want to stick around, I'm happy to go through the last couple of bits, or maybe just Zoho Books, because I think it looked like Sadly, nobody wanted to know about Zoho Writer, but if people want to stick around, I'm happy to spend another 15 minutes and we can go through Zoho Books as well. I can answer any questions there. If anyone has any questions now, feel free to send them in and I'll try and answer them as best I can. I think, Mark, you have you've done well out of us today with the questions, but you're more than welcome. Okay, so let's talk about Zoho Books, and then we'll wrap up just after that. I know we've gone a little bit over, but I'm keen to show you guys this. So Zoho Books has two fairly big updates, I think. So the first, well, before we get into the big updates, the small update is they've redesigned the sidebar. I've got an image here purely because they've all automatically switched to the new version, so it was hard to show off the old version. But what it's done is it's just restructured the sidebar a little bit and reordered things to make a little bit more sense. Some of the things that were hidden under time tracking has now moved to accountants, and sort of like filing and compliance has now moved into its own section. So just a little bit of a tidy up there. I think it's pretty useful because they've added so much to Zoho Books over the last year. Now, more importantly, in terms of new features, if I can find Zoho Books, the first one is, and these both need to be enabled. They're not enabled by default. So to enable these, we'll first do the project progress reports. To enable this, you're going to go into quotes. And then under the quotes in settings, you're going to allow the creation of progress invoice for a quote. What that will then allow you to do is when you go into your quotes, it may be called estimates in your system. It just depends on when and which country you've signed up for Zoho Books in. But if we go through and fill this in, we're going to do that now, fill in a customer type. We're just going to put in a load of items. You can see we've been doing some testing with some other clients in here with our corners and our big lorries and all sorts of other things. This is our demo for Ben. This is a demo planter. All sorts of random things in here. If I save that as a draft, oh, let's add our VAT treatment. Okay. So it's a bit of a pain using the test system because things are always kind of half set up and half in the process of being broken as we're setting up other things. Okay, so we've saved our quote. We'll send. We've saved that one. What that will then give you is something that looks a little bit like this. So we can see a quote here, and if I go into show PDF view, it's going to show me my quote. What I can now do is up the top here, I can click on our three little dots. Why is it not showing up? Let me just clone this. I think it's because I've actually already partially invoiced this one. So let's just clone and create a new one. Save as draft. Okay, so we have our draft here. I'm going to mark it as sent. You can now see we've got our convert button. I can now convert this to an invoice. And when I do that, it's now going to come up with the option to allow us to, oh, bear with me. We'll get there eventually, I promise. Let's mark the estimate as accepted. Then finally, let's go to convert and then we'll convert to invoice. And it's now going to give us an option. So previously, if I did has an estimate and I converted to invoice, it would just convert the whole estimate to the invoice. What I've now got is this option to convert just part of the estimate to an invoice. And I can do that by either invoicing a percentage of the total, or I can do a custom amount for each line item. When I do that and hit next, it will bring up the invoice as if I'm creating it normally. I can add and remove lines and I can choose the amount I'm going to invoice. So let's say to be invoiced, we're going to say we're going to invoice £5, £4 for that, £5 for that, sorry, £4 for that, but let's only do 5 for that and 500 for that. And I can hit save as draft. That's then going to create my invoice. If I now go back to my quote, I can now see that this quote, if I switch to views here, has now been partially invoiced. And in fact, it even says here that it's been partially invoiced. Now, previously, if you wanted to have this kind of functionality where you could invoice part of your quote and keep track of it, you'd have to use sales orders. So you'd convert your quote to a sales order and then you would invoice from the sales order. But sales orders really are designed for product-based businesses that are managing fulfillment and shipping and packaging and all of that kind of stuff. So adding sales orders into the process, if you're just a services company, kind of just added an extra layer of complexity. This removes that because it means you can keep track of it directly from the estimate. I can now, of course, go in and convert to invoice, and I can decide to invoice the remaining, or I can do another one. I can just do another custom amount, and I can go in. And what you'll see is it will show me just the remaining balances and the remaining items to be invoiced. So I can go in and do 555. Let's go for each of these. Save as draft. And it will see that then gives me that second invoice. And if I go back to my quotes, you can then see that you've now got both of those invoices listed there. So I think this is going to be a huge improvement. I know a couple of clients that I'm working with are using sales orders purely for just managing how much they've quoted against each estimate. This kind of bypasses that entirely. Now, this is what I thought was going to be the biggest books update of the month. Then last week, and some of you may have seen, I put a video out on LinkedIn as a kind of quick thing. All of a sudden, this fixed asset register appeared. Now, this is one of the biggest bugbears that I know a lot of accountants have had with Zoho Books. Now, again, this needs to be enabled. So again, to do this, you're going to go into Settings, General, and then tick the Fixed Asset Register. What that will do is it will enable this whole new section under the New Accountants tab for your fixed assets. And it does exactly what you'd like it to do. It allows you to write down and record what assets that you've got. So I can go in and say, okay, this is going to be a laptop. It costs £2,000. The current value is 2,000. I can set the purchase date. I can say the fixed asset type, and you can create different asset types as well. And when you do that, you can attribute different depreciation models to those asset types. I've set up a test one here. So when I select that, you'll see the depreciation methods all pull through and depreciation details. I can change this if I want though. If I want to do it as a one-off, I can say actually this is going to depreciate 20% on a yearly basis for the next 48 months. I wish there was a year's option in here. There's not yet. Maybe it'll be something that gets added. I can choose the type here. I can't say that word all of a sudden. And I can choose where the fixed asset is going to be recorded. So I'm going to say this is office equipment. Hit save as draft. And automatically then that is then going to keep track of my assets value. So I can click in, I can see the depreciation at the start, I can see its current value, and if I click into the depreciation tab, it will show me how the asset is depreciating over time. And in fact, you can also, when you create something, set the asset, the purchase date in the past, and then it will work out the current value, and then the how the value is going to decline over time. And it's going to automatically do all those journals for you, so you don't need to, as an accountant, do manual journals every month for managing your asset value. Automatically this is going to calculate it all for you based on how you set it up. So I think this is one of those things, it's such a game changer to Zoho Books to have this built in. And I know it's one of those things that a lot of companies, a lot of finance apps doesn't do particularly well actually. And I know I've heard complaints from a lot of accountants and finance people that I work with that get frustrated with this problem in other apps as well. So to have such a great version of it in Zoho is amazing. I sent the video I recorded on LinkedIn to a client last week, and that client had started setting it up by that afternoon and already had stuff in, and they're loving it because it's just one of those jobs that was taking them maybe a couple of hours a month to do all these journals is now just all automated. So it's a big win. Okay, just running through final questions here. So a question from Mark: can books connect to QuickBooks, as that is what my bookkeeper/accountant uses? There are some plugins to connect Books to other finance systems, but realistically, Books is designed to be your QuickBooks, to be your Xero. It is a standalone finance app. Once you start going down the route trying to connect it with other apps, it's possible. I've got a couple of clients where we do that for various reasons. But if I was designing a system from scratch, I would say do it either in Zoho Books or do it in QuickBooks. If you're looking for suggestions of accountants that will support Zoho Books, drop me a message. I work with a number of them that are very, very good, and I'm always happy to give you their names. Question from Leo: is this convert to invoice being rolled out, as I don't have it yet? Sorry, I should have clarified. I'm not sure how to get a quote to say only 50% at the start and log like you showed. Okay, Leo, so it might well be, again, like with things with Zoho, sometimes they do roll things out in batches, so it might simply be that it hasn't hit your account yet. However, I would suggest just double checking in the quote settings or the estimate settings, depending on the naming in your system, and just make sure that that checkbox is checked, because it might be that it's not checked by, it might be that it's been added and it's just not turned on yet. Um, I think it's one of those things I wish Zoho did a better job of. They're always adding features, but very, very rarely do they communicate them particularly well. So sometimes it just becomes a guessing game. And also sometimes when they're doing rollouts, because they roll things out slowly over the, globally over time, sometimes it's hard to know when you're going to get an update. Like in the example of the module filtering I showed earlier in the CRM, I've had that in my CRM for 4, 5, 6 weeks now, but it's not yet in our test system. At some point, it's going to just appear, but it's one of those things we don't quite know when, which is always a little bit frustrating, I guess. I think that covers it all for today. Obviously, thank you very much, everybody, for coming along, sticking through just over an hour now of questions and everything else. I will share the recording of this afterwards in case anybody wants to look it back. But yeah, that's it for today. Obviously, if anyone has any questions, I'll stick around for the next couple of minutes. But otherwise, everyone enjoy your Friday afternoons and have a good weekend.